Picture a valley filling with water. You have maybe an hour, maybe less. The river that your grandmother called safe has become something unrecognizable. It has swallowed the low ground, the storage pits, the sleeping areas. Children are being carried, elders are being dragged. Everything your group owned and everyone your group needed is being sorted in real time into two categories: what survives and what doesn't. Now imagine that you make it. You climb high enough. The water rises and then, eventually, it stops. You look down at a landscape that no longer exists. The world you knew is gone. A new one is sitting in its place. That experience is roughly 10,000 years old. It is also roughly 100,000 years old. It may be as old as the human brain itself. Here is the strange part. More than 200 separate cultures on every continent except Antarctica developed a flood myth, a story about water consuming the world, a small group surviving, and a new beginning rising from the destruction. Ancient Mesopotamia had one, ancient Greece had one, the Aztecs had one, the Yoruba had one. Indigenous tribes in Alaska, in Australia, in the Amazon basin, in sub-Saharan Africa, all of them had one. None of these cultures were in contact with each other. Many of them did not even share a common ancestor. They invented the same story independently across thousands of years on opposite sides of the planet. That is not a coincidence. That is a pattern. And patterns like that don't come from culture. They come from something underneath it. The question is not whether Noah's Ark was real or whether Gilgamesh's flood happened. The question is why the human brain keeps building this story independently everywhere it exists. The answer starts long before religion. It starts with water. To understand how this happened, you have to think about what water actually meant to the people building these stories. Not water from a tap, not water from a bottle. Water as the single most powerful force your ancestors encountered on a regular basis. Around 10,000 BCE, as the last ice age ended, sea levels rose dramatically, nearly 400 feet over several thousand years. Coastal communities that had existed for generations were swallowed permanently. River valleys flooded, lake shores shifted. Black Sea researchers William Ryan and Walter Pittman proposed in 1997 that the Black Sea itself may have transformed rapidly from a freshwater lake into a saltwater sea during this period, potentially displacing tens of thousands of people. The geological evidence suggests something catastrophic happened. The human memory of it may have survived in the stories. But geological events alone don't explain 200 independent stories on separate continents. For that, you need something inside the brain. The human brain has a feature that predates language, predates agriculture, predates every organized religion ever invented. Psychologists call it catastrophic memory consolidation. It is the brain's tendency to encode extreme survival events, especially ones involving sudden environmental destruction with unusual permanence and emotional weight. Ordinary days don't survive across generations. Your ancestors' routine Tuesday is gone, but the flood that destroyed everything, the fire that consumed the valley, the earthquake that rearranged the landscape, those memories stick. And in a world without writing, the only archive was the story told around the fire. Here is how the mechanism works. A real flood event occurs. People survive it. The brain treats it as the most important information the group possesses. It attaches extreme emotional weight to the memory, which makes it easier to transmit, easier to remember, and harder to distort over time. The people who heard that story and took it seriously were more likely to build at elevation, to watch river behavior, to leave before the warning signs disappeared. The people who dismissed the story were more likely to die in the next flood. Over generations, the story becomes sacred precisely because it works. It saves lives. And because it saves lives, it gets dressed in the most powerful protective clothing a culture can provide. It becomes a message from the gods. But this is where things get really interesting, because catastrophic memory is only half the mechanism. The other half is something researchers call narrative universalizing. The human brain does not store survival information as data, it stores it as story. And stories, by nature, seek scale. A local flood becomes the flood. A surviving family becomes the last family. A god who warned them becomes the god who chose them, not because anyone is lying, because the brain encodes survival lessons at the largest possible scale to ensure they cannot be forgotten, dismissed, or treated as irrelevant to someone living one valley over. The story cannot afford to be local. If it stays local, the next generation moves 2 days' walk away and treats it as someone else's problem. So the brain scales it up. It scales it up until the stakes are everything. This sounds like philosophy. It isn't. Researchers have actually measured this. In a landmark study of oral tradition preservation, anthropologist Patrick Nunn of the University of the Sunshine Coast documented indigenous Australian stories that appear to accurately describe sea level changes from more than 7,000 years ago. These stories described specific bays, specific landmarks, specific geographic transformations that geologists later confirmed as real. The stories were not mythology. They were geological field notes, preserved in narrative form across hundreds of generations, because the human brain found the only storage format reliable enough to survive that long. A story with a god in it. The god is not decoration, the god is the filing system. This is the reframe most people miss entirely. The flood myth is not proof of a universal catastrophe. It is not proof that every culture shared contact with a single ancient event. It is something far more interesting. It is proof that the human brain independently developed the same solution to the same problem everywhere it existed, across thousands of years. The problem was this: how do you make sure critical survival information survives you? You can't write it down, you can't store it. The only transmission technology you have is another human brain. And human brains have a known vulnerability. They forget. They especially forget things that haven't happened recently, things that feel abstract, things that don't seem immediately relevant. The brain solution was to attach the information to the most emotionally unforgettable structure it could build: total destruction, divine warning, miraculous survival, covenant for the future. The flood myth didn't spread from one culture to all the others. Every brain built it separately because every brain faced the same engineering problem, and water was the most catastrophically obvious threat available. Floods erase everything. They are visible. They are total. They leave no room for partial warnings or ambiguous lessons. The message of a flood is completely clear. You were not paying attention, and now everything is gone. The brain did not develop catastrophic memory consolidation to create religion. It developed it to preserve survival information across generations. The flood myth was the side effect, and it was a very successful one. Today, somewhere between 2 and 3 billion people hold some version of the flood story as sacred truth. The details differ, the names of the gods differ, the shape of the vessel differs, but the structure is identical everywhere. Warning, destruction, survival, covenant. The brain that built the Mesopotamian flood story and the brain that built the Aztec flood story were running the exact same program. They just had different materials. And here is what that means for you right now. You have almost certainly never survived a flood, but your brain is still running the same software that built these stories. Every time you feel an instinctive unease near rising water, every time a dark sky over a river makes something old and animal shift inside your chest, every time a disaster story lands differently than an ordinary news story, that is the same mechanism. That is a 100,000-year-old survival program evaluating whether this is the kind of information you need to remember forever. The flood myth didn't survive because it was true. It survived because the brain that holds it is very, very good at staying alive. And somewhere inside you, it is still paying attention.